Well, it's finally time to talk about my Mattel Intellivision. Wait, I sold it already. Called my local game shops, nobody has one. I do have enough first-hand experience with the thing though, enough to know that I don't particularly want to own one again. Look, the Intellivision is a cool system, but it also kinda sucks. The hardware is solid, for the time. There are some pretty fun games, and it has this unique feel overall compared with its contemporaries. But it's also annoyingly big. The cartridge port's on the side, which feels wrong. Has hardwired controllers, said controllers I've never heard anyone speak positively about. Still yet to try the Intellivision 2, and credit where it's due, at least you can replace its controllers. Either way, you have to deal with the controller's form factor and overlays. Well, I guess you can skip that last one should you memorize what the buttons do for each game. Not many use the entire keypad to my knowledge. There were a few complicated strategy games that do, but I would argue many of those were only so complex because of what they had to work with. Those overly ambitious games haven't aged particularly well in my opinion, but to each their own. Man, that Intellivision controller. It's the reason I decided to get rid of mine years ago. While sliding them in and out of the console is pretty cool and the old phone cable design is hilarious in modern day, actually using them is so bizarre. I never figured out how you're supposed to actually hold one of these. That disc you see there? That's a D-pad, I guess. It's interesting, but not particularly great to use. The disc is not flush with the controller, you have to push it in a bit and then rub the disc around to make quick movements. It's just such an awkward design. I didn't press up, I pressed right. This controller sucks. Not to say it isn't functional, but there's a reason we adopted the later D-pad. Yeah, speaking of which, D-pads weren't really a thing at the time. Most platforms used some kind of joystick. So it might be appropriate to say this was ahead of its time, but people also say that about the Ouya. The keypad buttons themselves, they're okay. For most games, they're not an integral part of the experience, more so for menus and navigation. Don't press buttons, please. Okay. Why? 2. Game 2. Enter. How many rounds? 82?! Oh, Lord. It's usually essential for getting into a game, though, and that's why emulating the Intellivision is hardly ever practical. It's still strange to me that so many companies ended up bandwagoning this keypad idea. Sure, it does mean less buttons on the console itself, hooray convenience. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic here, these were the early days and you have to start somewhere. But then my attention is brought to the action buttons on the left and right. These might be even worse than the disc. They're so squishy and oftentimes your inputs wouldn't be recognized. Okay, that's probably due to their age, so I can't fault them for that, but I can fault them for being small rectangles on the sides of the controller. A few moments ago I said the Intellivision is a pain to emulate, which isn't as true on the PC as you've got a whole keypad in front of you, but anywhere else, this gets tricky. Unless there's a dedicated overlay button to allow direct navigation of the keypad, well, good luck mapping all of that. My favorite method of playing Intellivision games now is with the 6th gen compilation called Intellivision Lives. You can press select to immediately access the overlay. Simple.
I really miss my Intellivision, and now I'm bleeding.
If you've never heard the Intellivision song by Michael Schwartz, I have no idea why this was made for the compilation. It's about some guy mourning his Intellivision because his mother sold it at a garage sale. It was made as an homage to 80s love songs. And the Intellivision, of course.
I want my Intellivision.
So what I have with me today is a list of what I consider highlights of the Intellivision library. 20 games in total which left a lasting impact on me, including a couple that just seemed interesting to look at. I've decided to split them up into a few categories, starting with what I consider the staples. Astrosmash. This is a fixed shooter where you blow up asteroids, spinners, satellites, and eventually UFOs. It started development as an asteroids clone known as Meteor, but allegedly shifted gears after fears of getting sued by Atari. It's a simple premise: shoot everything that moves before it passes the screen. You won't lose by letting asteroids pass, but they will reduce your score. However, at such small increments that it hardly matters. The time of day changes as you play, which is really just an instant background swap. Astrosmash is an example among many, many Intellivision games where you get far too many lives. That or the points required for an extra ship are so low that you never stop accumulating them. I've never gotten a game over in Astrosmash while actively playing. You eventually just get bored and decide to stop. Not to say Astrosmash is necessarily a bad game, but it's far too easy. I guess they expected you to play for, 30 minutes straight? Yeah, right. Buzz Bombers. Bees are descending row by row in your garden, trying to pollinate flowers in order to block the player's path below. Prevent them from doing so by using your spray can. Yes, it's another fixed shooter, I promise there's more variety to come. Spraying worker bees reveals a standard honeycomb, and spraying fast bees reveals a red honeycomb. Try not to shoot the honeycombs because you'll want the nearby hummingbird to eat them for points. Whichever honeycombs are left after the round give you more points. Between waves, you get to see this fun animation of the bees chasing a bear, or vice versa. I like buzz bombers. The presentation is great. I'll admit it's a bit hard to line up your shots, but with enough practice, I can see it becoming second nature. Lock and Chase. This one isn't in the compilation, probably because it's from Data East, but it was a popular game for the system, and even came bundled on the Intellivision 2 at one point. You play as a robber trying to steal from the bank. All the while police will chase you around the place. It's just an alteration of Pac-Man where instead of a fruit in the middle, it's a big dollar sign that angers the police for a moment. Collect all the dots, then exit for your escape. The lock part of the game reflects the trap doors that constantly open and close. Be careful not to get trapped. Lock and Chase is fun, one of the better Pac-Man clones in my opinion, and it looks great on the Intellivision. Night Stalker. The player is stuck in a maze with robots, spiders, and bats hunting you down. I've just noticed something about Intellivision games. In my 2600 library videos, I'd spend the first 30 or so seconds briefing the game's plot. Intellivision games, however, they rarely have one. Even in the manual for Night Stalker, it's just, you're in a maze with robots. So, to start, escape your safe zone and find the flashing pistol. Pick it up for 6 bullets. After you've run out, find the next pistol somewhere random on the map. If you couldn't tell, this is essentially a twin-stick shooter, and it uses the keypad for shooting. I guess that's fine. As you accumulate points, new robot types will spawn in, each with distinct characteristics. They'll always spawn in from the bottom left, following you throughout the map as you collect more ammunition. Not all threats can kill you, like these bats for example. I once got stun-locked by them for a whole 20 seconds trying to get that gun. Come on, get out of here already! Night Stalker isn't bad. I like the menacing sound effects. Does get repetitive fast, but I think it's suitable as a sort of guilty pleasure game once in a while. Shark Shark. This is my favorite game on the Intellivision, and many agree that it's one of the best. I was introduced to it, well, to be more accurate, I was introduced to the Intellivision as a whole in 2003 with this 10-in-1 plug-and-play. Found the empty box in my parents' attic the other day. Oh well. The games on there were converted into NES ROMs, and we actually have those ROMs now. I did capture some footage of the plug-and-play long ago. Its interpretations are on the rough side, but I mean, technically speaking, they do pretty much play the same. Ultimately, I'm bringing this device up because of the hilarious sound the shark makes in this version. Okay, back to the real Intellivision compilation game. So, in Shark Shark, you play as a little yellow fish, and the goal is to eat similarly sized fish. Eventually, you'll level up in size, which expands your diet as you can now eat bigger fish. It is hard to tell on first impression which fish are okay to eat, but the game's manual, which I still have somehow, does its best to clear that up. As you'd expect from the title, there is also a shark, which you can sort of eat. Nibbling its tail a couple times allows you to kill it, which gives you a lot of points and usually a size upgrade by the time it's dead. You can do this as any size, by the way, so it's a great way to quickly level up. Be careful though, the shark turns around with every bite. Not to mention, the thing moves around unpredictably on the regular. Getting near it is always a risk versus reward situation. The only real issue I have with Shark Shark is one of those familiar Intellivision tropes. Too many lives, too easy to farm them. I should note that this game has a cooperative mode, which is what you'd expect it to be. No joke, me and a friend still play this every so often. Shark Shark is timeless. I will say, the frame rate isn't as good in co-op, unless that's just an Intellivision Lives thing, and the shark seems to behave somewhat differently here. Also, when a player loses a life, the other has to also lose before the other can respawn. I believe that's all I have to say. You should play Shark Shark if you get the chance, and if you're a fan of Feeding Frenzy, take a look at its obvious inspiration. Snafu! This one's iconic. It's basically the light cycle mode from Tron Arcade, but as an entire game of its own. Build a trail without running into the wall or another player's trail. Chaos ensues as the board fills, giving you less available space to move. The last player alive wins. There are a variety of modes to choose from, including a sort of snake clone where you have to munch the other's tail. Some modes let you move diagonally, in which you can actually slide between the other player's trails if you're careful. My favorite mode is the one with random obstacles, which gives you more to be on the lookout for. Snafu can be played solo with a computer player, or multiplayer with a second player. Not much I can say about that directly, it's the same game either way. I think you get the picture. Snafu makes for a great time, even today. Space Armada. So the story behind this one is, the Space Invaders copyright wasn't properly protected back when, so you could get away with making whatever clone you wanted and sell it without issue. It's basically Space Invaders for Intellivision and, I don't know. It's fine, I guess. There's less empty space on the board as your enemies are much larger than you would be used to. Rounds also take far less time than a usual Space Invaders wave. I guess this would suffice back when, if you wanted to play Space Invaders at home. Today, it's little more than a strange alternative. Thin Ice. This game is equally as entertaining as it is frustrating. So, you play as this penguin named Duncan, who's annoying his dancing penguin friends by circling around them with his ice skates, then sending them into the water. At first I thought you were saving them from the seal and polar bear, but no, the manual says it's against their will. The seal, if it makes contact with your ice trail, will chase you relentlessly until you enter the water. So try to make an opening first by circling at least one penguin before getting close to him. Said close encounter with the seal or polar bear will result in a lost life. But you can dunk them too, if you're lucky. That gets you more points. There are also various items you can collect to further increase your score. Dunk all the penguins on the stage to move on to the next one, at which point you get a fun animation of Duncan using a Zamboni to clear the ice. I quite enjoy Thin Ice. What's that frustrating thing about it? That dang seal, who I actually have a newfound appreciation for in realizing that he's actually the good guy here. So those are all the games that I consider the Intellivision staples. This next game I can't really categorize. It was unreleased, but I wanted to include it because of its use of the voice synthesis module known as IntelliVoice. This is Magic Carousel. Apparently the IntelliVoice wasn't selling very well, so they put a stop to its production of games. This is one of those that got the boot. It's an educational game for kids where you have to correctly pick the mentioned animal, then you're sent to a screen where you have to direct the animal to whatever's being specified. Check the overlay, then press the correct button to complete a task.
Hello, now drink that milk.
After so many tasks are completed, you're sent back to the carousel to do it all over again. It's very simple, and would have been fun for young players, I suppose. Having the thing talk to you was a very cool novelty at the time. In the case of this game, think of it like the 80s equivalent of a leapfrog tablet. Now let's take a look at some multiplayer games. The system came with 2 built-in controllers, so obviously that is a big part of the Intellivision experience. We talked about Snafu and Shark already, but here are a few others that I found interesting. Biplanes. This is a part of the Triple Action game, which the Intellivision Lives collection conveniently separates into its own launcher. Before starting, you get the option between long and short-range bullets, which accounts for the easy and hard difficulty setting. I won't lie, this game was incredibly difficult for the both of us during the first couple of minutes. Let me explain. You and a friend compete for 15 points. You'll quickly notice the engine stalls if you climb too fast, much like a real plane. The walls to your left and right don't actually exist, as the screen loops when you pass through them. The ground is real, though, and you can expect to collide with it a dozen times before adjusting to the physics. That balloon in the middle? It occasionally rises and you can shoot it for another point. I promise you, give this game a chance and it does start making sense. Then it's incredibly fun to play. We had a blast spinning around each other, shooting through the clouds that block your vision, and successfully pulling off risky maneuvers is very satisfying.
Only it seems more real. Like we're there.
As this game was difficult for the both of us, it felt equally fair to play. With a little patience, Biplanes becomes an awesome competitive experience. Stadium Mud Buggies. As a later release for the system, they seem to get a better grasp on handling interfaces. Select a menu with the correct number, then change the corresponding options to your preference. It's a little weird still, but you can tell they were trying to adapt with the times. So this is a competitive racing game where you can take part in numerous events. These are essentially modes of gameplay on different maps. Much like Biplanes, Mud Buggies has a learning curve, although I feel it is somewhat easier to grasp here. We didn't even know gear shifting was a thing in this game until it was over, but that explains why we couldn't efficiently climb hills. Controlling the buggies is a bit odd. Just tapping on left or right often sends you into the other car. It's sensitive, but you can sort of adjust over time. Should you make a jump, the player will see a shadow realistically positioned according to the car's height. That's really neat to see. We enjoyed this game today, though I wonder how appreciated it was at the time of release. Stadium Mud Buggies was from 1988, which was well beyond the introduction of the NES. The Sega Genesis was right around the corner, too. I can suggest giving this game a try with a friend, but only if they're already into retro games. Word Rockets. This is a part of the Learning Fun 2 game, but again, separately launched in Intellivision Lives. 2 players will compete by using their wagons to collect and shoot a letter into a blank word. If the word is valid and you've lined up your letter correctly, a point is collected. If the letter is not lined up correctly, it'll simply bounce off and you'll have to try again. The first player with 25 points wins. This isn't necessarily about who can connect the dots fastest, it's partially up to chance based on where the letters are sitting, and if the other player has enough time to get there before you do. This was really fun. We were blurting out words left and right, a variety of such words being complete nonsense. You know, one thing I have to give to the Intellivision, it was far more capable of making readable text than the 2600. I feel that influenced a lot of what the Intellivision had to offer. And now for the last category of the day, I can't believe it's not Atari. So, games that were either popularized on the Atari 2600, or closely resemble a game from that platform. This won't be all of them, there are actually quite a few that made it to both. I'll have to emulate these on PC as they're not in the Intellivision Lives collection for obvious reasons. Atlantis, a game by Imagic. We're starting off strong here, look at these detailed environments. Graphically a huge improvement over the 2600, although that is expected to some extent. This plays like Atlantis, obviously, but as you can tell it also resembles Missile Command with that crosshair for targeting ships. There are 2 missile towers to use, each better for attacking alternate directions. Unlike the Atari version, enemies descend in unique patterns. Don't let them get to the bottom, or they'll destroy a tower in the city. If all towers are destroyed, the game ends and your ship below takes off. You might remember that from the Atari version, however here you can actually deploy that ship at any time and attack enemies directly, then land it whenever you choose. Be careful, as you have limited fuel, which can be further depleted if you run into enemy ships. If you run out completely, the ship explodes and you won't be able to use it again until the next day. Yeah, there's a whole day-to-night cycle here, that's pretty darn cool. During the night, you can only see enemy ships with the 2 spotlights. Dang, this version of the game has tons of variety to it. This has got to be one of the best Intellivision games I've played, seriously. High quality stuff here, blows the 2600 version out of the water. No pun intended. Beamrider, a game by Activision. This plays exactly the same as the 2600 version. You move left to right, destroy enemy saucers, then save your missile reserve for the Sector Sentinel at the end. I love how the screen shakes when you lose a life. Honestly, it's hard to decide which is the better version here. Both are by all means sufficient and very enjoyable experiences. Centipede. This is the only game in this list developed by Atari themselves. So how did Atari do when it came to making games for the competitor? Intellivision themselves made decent ports for the 2600, under the name M-Network, although it often felt like they weren't giving their A-game. Take Burger Time as a noteworthy example. Yes, it's another Data East game, but Intellivision was responsible for both respective ports. It's obvious they didn't want this to outshine their Intellivision counterpart. I will say that Atari clearly put effort into their Intellivision games. Centipede is a decent example of that. The only true negative quality here would be the animation of the Centipede itself. It's a bit choppy. Yeah, for that reason alone, I do prefer the 2600 version. It also just feels smoother to play and is more fast-paced. But if I was stuck exclusively with this Intellivision version, I wouldn't be complaining. Demon Attack, another game by Imagic. Does it hold up to the standards set with Atlantis? Unfortunately not. On the 2600, Demon Attack has a good variety of different demons to shoot. The Intellivision has 3, which just loop on and on and on until you get to the boss. The 2600 version didn't have a boss, so that's one edge this version has. It is cool to see those smaller demons closing in on you at this point. Even though the boss is essentially a copy of Phoenix, it works well enough. Demon attack may look nice on the Intellivision, but the variety isn't there. If the 2600 version didn't exist, then this would be a fine shooter, I guess. It looks better than it plays, in my opinion. Frogger. The rights of this one are all over the place. Developed by Rockland under the supervision of Parker Bros, using a license that Sega had obtained from the original game developers, Konami. I get that Frogger is an arcade game. I could have made a separate category for arcade conversions, but considering the games in this category are also famous on Atari, it's easier to group them here. You can also argue that these ports were competing with each other more over the arcade games that they're based on. Anyways, you know Frogger, right? Get 5 frogs across the road, then pass the swamp into their hideout. It plays almost identically to the 2600 version, although the warning for descending turtle shells is extremely brief. That's a pretty big deal in my opinion. As it only looks slightly better than the 2600 version, I can't quite recommend it. Pitfall, another game by Activision. You're probably familiar with the famous 2600 game, where you have to explore a forest while dodging barrels, jumping pits, crossing crocodiles, and collecting prizes. If you've played that one before, then you've pretty much played this too. I'm having trouble finding much of a difference between them, beyond a slight color palette change. If you don't mind the Intellivision controller, and like having complete copies of your games, you may want to buy the Intellivision version instead because it is far less expensive. River Raid. Activision once again. In River Raid, you're behind enemy lines. Destroy whatever you can while keeping an eye on your fuel tank. Refill it by hovering over fuel reserves. Or you can just blow them up for points, if you have enough fuel already. Destroy a bridge and you get a checkpoint. I want to say this is a visual improvement over the 2600 version, but honestly, the targets themselves look a bit odd. Why are the boats blue and helicopters yellow? Fuel tanks are positioned horizontally rather than vertical, which maybe that makes more sense realistically, but now you're getting less time to refuel. The bridges look a lot better, I'll admit, and the nearby trees give it more visual variety. It feels essentially the same as the 2600 version, although I believe the river's layout is different. Definitely more narrow at points. Yeah, I don't know. This is fine, I guess, but the 2600 version has a much better feel to it overall. Zaxxon. Here's another port with confusing rights management, but like Frogger earlier, it was primarily developed by Rockland. I used to own this port when I had an Intellivision. I kept wanting to like it as this front-facing perspective for Zaxxon is a neat alternative. I remember being able to kind of get the hang of it, though playing it now years later, I am struggling quite a bit. The problem is it's very hard to determine the height at which you're shooting. While I think this could have worked better somehow, the isometric perspective just works more naturally for this game. If you want a great home port of this game, the ColecoVision is where it's at. Huh, ColecoVision. That's another system I used to own, which I should get around to covering eventually. So that was my curated list of noteworthy Intellivision games. As you can see, there are some solid games for the system. There are of course bad ones as well, but my intention today was to show some highlights. Maybe ironic with me bad-mouthing the console at the beginning, but hey, I was just being honest. I'm not interested in playing bad Intellivision games, and I'm also not interested in owning an Intellivision. I still appreciate it though, and will continue to revisit its library every couple years, using a much better controller, of course. Unlike my Atari series, I don't see myself doing a second Intellivision library video. I'm into arcade-like experiences, which you can probably tell at this point, especially on these older consoles. Atari had a lot more going for it there. The Intellivision was more about graphics, and you might think, why is that related? Well, take for instance, human silhouettes. Compared with the 2600's limitations, on Intellivision they were often much easier to recognize as people. Every other game on this system used human players, and they could get away with it too because of all the detailed animation. But as if resulting from that, you often get really slow or choppy gameplay. In today's list I might not have shown many examples of this, but what I'm showing on screen now is more reflective of that. Take the average Intellivision game versus the average Atari game, and you'll probably notice a distinct difference in speed. It seems like realism was the active company narrative at the time. Satisfying gameplay was secondary. Yeah, the Intellivision was impressive when it came out, and there are some good games, but there's a reason people fondly remember the Atari, while the Intellivision makes for a passing conversation at best. And that just about does it for this one. I know it's been a while since I've been able to make a full video. Ain't that life? Hopefully you've enjoyed the little YouTube shorts I made during the absence. Did you know about those? Check them out, I think they're fun. Oh, also, remember when I said that last Atari 2600 compilation video would be the final? Guess that was wishful thinking, as I've since discovered many other 2600 games that I'd like to showcase at some point. Once again, thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to catch you all in the next video.